You saw it on tape last year. Sure, there's a ways to go, but what rookie isn't? I mean, what first-year player doesn't have a long way to go? So I'm excited to get started with him and all of our quarterbacks and all of our players.
I think you see playmaking ability. I think you see a player that is confident in his skill set. So when you see that playmaking ability and inner confidence, you say, okay, there's something to work with there. So I think that's the thing that excites you.
Todd Monken did not come into that interview sounding like a coach who was trying to win a press conference. He sounded like a coach who already knows exactly what kind of football team he wants, exactly what kind of quarterback room he is inheriting, and exactly how hard the job is going to be in Cleveland. And that is why his comments on Shedeur Sanders matter more than people think. Because Monken did not go overboard. He did not sell fantasy. He did not give fans some empty sky's the limit speech just to excite the base. What he actually did was more important. He gave a measured answer that still told you a lot. He basically said, yes, there is something real there with Shedeur. Yes, there is ability worth working with. But now the responsibility shifts to the coaches. And that right there is the part that should have Browns fans paying attention.
They would have said that Shedeur Sanders was athletic. They would have said he could escape. Well, the game's changed so much to now he's not a mobile quarterback. No, he's mobile. He's just not as mobile as what we've come to. We've come to where Lamar Jackson or the quickness that these players have, their escapability is completely changed.
Because the interview starts with Monken talking big picture football, and honestly, that matters to the Shedeur conversation more than people realize. He talked about how offensive football has changed over the last 15 years, how the spread offense exploded, how quarterback-driven systems changed everything, and how the trickle-up effect from high school to college to the NFL has completely reshaped player development. That is not just generic coach talk. That is Monken telling you he understands where modern quarterbacks come from now. He understands that most of these guys are not growing up in old-school, under-center, fullback-heavy systems. They are coming from spread environments. They are coming from tempo, space, athleticism, shotgun reps, quick game, and improvisation. So when he later talks about Shedeur not growing up in a pro-style offense, he is not saying that as some knock. He is saying it as reality.
A very young player that really didn't grow up in a pro-style offense. It's not his fault.
Here's the part nobody is talking about. Monken is basically telling Browns fans that if Shedeur needs development, that is not some red flag hanging over the kid's head. That is normal football in 2026. The game has changed. Quarterbacks do not arrive factory-built for old NFL expectations anymore. They arrive shaped by the football world they came through. And if a coach cannot adapt to that, then that is on the coach, not the player. That is why Monken's line hit so hard when he said it is not the player's fault if he did not grow up in a pro-style offense, and now it becomes the coach's fault if they cannot develop him. That is one of the strongest things he said in the entire interview, because it places real accountability where it belongs.
That's okay. I was at Oklahoma State with Brandon Weeden, and we were air raid, and he got drafted here. He didn't grow up in that. That's not their fault. Now it's going to be our fault if we can't develop them. Then it's our fault. It's our job is to develop all the players that show up in the building and try to get the best out of all of them, create the best version of them.
And before he ever got to Shedeur specifically, Monken made it clear what his entire offensive philosophy is going to be built on. He said he wants physicality, effort, and execution to pop off the tape, not just one of them, all three. That is important because those are not scheme buzzwords, those are identity words. He is basically saying, I can adapt the methods, I can change the system, I can mold things based on the roster, but what cannot change is how the team looks on film. It has to look like a group that plays hard, knows what it is doing, and brings real edge. That matters because it tells you what kind of environment Shedeur is walking into. This is not going to be a freewheeling, just go out there and make plays setup. Monken wants discipline with force behind it. He wants the offense to look intentional. This is where it gets dangerous, because when a young quarterback enters a room led by a coordinator or play caller like that, there is no hiding. If you are sloppy, it shows. If you are late, it shows. If your mechanics, timing, or command are not where they need to be, it shows immediately. But the flip side is just as important. If you are confident, if you are sharp, if you can process and create, a coach like Monken will notice it fast because he is clearly obsessed with how tape feels. He kept coming back to tape in that interview, how it ought to look, what ought to pop, what he despises seeing when football looks undisciplined or unprepared. That tells you his evaluation process is not going to be about hype or draft status or social media buzz. It's going to be about whether the players' reps look like winning football.
Our job is to develop all the players that show up in the building and try to get the best out of all of them, create the best version of them.
And that is why his direct comments on Shedeur were so telling. He said when he watches Shedeur on tape, he sees playmaking ability. He sees confidence in his skill set. Stop right there because that's already more valuable than some people realize. Coaches do not casually throw around phrases like that when talking about young quarterbacks unless they believe there's a real foundation. Playmaking ability means he sees ways Shedeur can create outside the clean, scripted world of the playbook. Confidence in his skill set means he sees a quarterback who is not unsure of himself, not afraid of the position, not shrinking when things speed up. Those are big traits. Those are starter traits if they are developed the right way. Monken did not say the first thing he saw was arm talent, size, or some flashy athletic trait. He said playmaking and confidence. That is huge because it means his first reaction to Shedeur is rooted in quarterbacking, not just tools. There are plenty of coaches who get hypnotized by measurables first. Monken did not go there. He went to the stuff that actually translates when the lights come on. Can the player make something happen? Does the player believe in what he is doing? Does he carry himself like a quarterback who can operate under pressure? That is what Monken was pointing to, and that should matter to Browns fans because it sounds like he sees a player with a real internal base to build on. Then Monken made another point that was easy to miss but actually says a lot. He said that 15 or 20 years ago, people would have called Shedeur athletic. They would have called him a guy who could escape. But because the game has changed so much, because we now live in an era of quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and other ridiculous movers, the standard has shifted. In other words, Shedeur is mobile, just not mobile by today's insane NFL comparison scale. That is a smart distinction. It protects the evaluation from becoming lazy. Too many people now hear not a runner like Lamar and translate that into immobile, which is not the same thing at all.
I said it this morning that 15 or 20 years ago, they would have said that Shedeur Sanders was athletic. They would have said he could escape. Well, the game's changed so much to now he's not a mobile quarterback. No, he's mobile. He's just not as mobile as what we've come to. We've come to where Lamar Jackson or the quickness that these players have, their escapability has completely changed from when it was. But I do think what you see on tape are those aspects. A very young player that really didn't grow up in a pro-style offense. It's not his fault. That's okay. I was at Oklahoma State with Brandon Weeden, and we were air raid, and he got drafted here. He didn't grow up in that. That's not their fault.
This is where young players usually make a mistake. They start chasing comparisons instead of owning what they actually are. If Shedeur has playmaking ability and confidence, if he has enough mobility to survive and create, if he has the mindset Monken sees on tape, then the next question becomes whether Cleveland can actually develop him the right way. And that's where Browns fans have every right to be skeptical. This franchise has not exactly built a reputation as a quarterback finishing school. That's putting it politely. So Monken saying the right things is a good start, but it also raises the pressure, because now you have an offensive mind with a real track record stepping into the building and basically saying, if the kid has something, it is on us to get it out. That is accountability. That is not ducking the challenge. And you can see how that connects to his overall vision for the 2026 Browns. He was asked what the biggest difference will be between the 2025 Browns and what fans see now, and he did not go into gadget plays or formation talk. He went right back to the same pillars: physicality, effort, execution. He talked about despising sloppy football, despising when it looks like a team hasn't practiced, despising when the operation doesn't reflect the standard. That is such an important detail for the quarterback conversation, because the quarterback sits right at the center of all of that. A quarterback room either stabilizes the offense or infects it with hesitation. If Shedeur is going to eventually take control, it's going to have to happen in an environment where the details matter. Monken is making that non-negotiable from day one. Monken also mentioned the quarterback room as a place where there absolutely should be huge growth. He brought up Deshaun, Shedeur, Dylan, and said there ought to be unbelievable development there. That's not a throwaway line. That's him planting a marker. He's telling everybody now that he expects serious improvement from that room as a whole. And when a coach says that publicly, he's doing two things at once. First, he's giving himself room to coach the entire room without forcing a premature QB1 narrative. Second, he's making it clear that stagnation is not acceptable. Somebody in that room had better get better fast, because that's where this offense is going to rise or sink.
Shedeur Sanders doesn't need hype right now. He needs patience. And that's exactly how Monken is approaching him. He's not trying to satisfy fans by throwing him out there tomorrow. He wants to build the right version of him first. The worst thing Cleveland could do is turn every Shedeur rep into a test before the foundation is even laid. Talent and confidence are great, but young quarterbacks still need structure, refinement, and reps that actually teach them something. One underrated part of Monken's interview was when he talked about being open-minded. He said closed-minded people miss chances to evolve. That matters, because the fastest way to fail a young quarterback is for a coach to get too attached to his own system instead of finding what the player does best. Monken sounds like the opposite of that. Strong beliefs, but flexible methods. That combination is exactly what a young quarterback needs. And here's the part nobody is really talking about. The Browns don't just need Shedeur to be talented, they need him to be stable. Cleveland has been through too much quarterback chaos to just chase flash. Monken's language points towards something more reliable: physicality, execution, discipline, development. If he can tie Shedeur's playmaking to real structure, then you may actually have something worth building around.